someone PM'd me footage from their baby cam.
Mm-hmm.
And said, hey, what is this? And am I like losing my mind, or is this something? And so she's like, she told me where it was. And I was getting chills watching it. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, you've got someone visiting.
Really?
And,
what happened in the video?
So you see the shadow of a person. It's a short person. It was like a grandma. It was a grandma or a great grandma, and leaning in the crib, and you see the hand like pat the baby's back.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 29 of Paranormal Among Us. On today's episode, we'll be talking with spiritual healer and medium Jillie Maria. That interview is coming up here in just a few seconds. But first, I'd like to remind you that if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any new content that comes out in the near future. Also, if you have a paranormal story that you would like to share, or if you would like to be a guest on the show, please email me at paranormalamongus72@gmail.com. That's paranormalamongus72@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All right. We are now joined with Jillie Maria. Jillie, how you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I am well, thank you. I hope you are.
Doing good, doing good. You are a healer and a medium.
Yes.
How long have you been a healer, for one? Let's start with that.
Well, I consider myself, when I say the word healer, I want to clarify that a healer means that you can hold space, because in spiritual circles, a lot of times, we confuse the word healer with having a modality certification. And there's a lot of people that have modality certifications, such as Reiki, the Akashic Records, etc. And they have no idea how to hold space. And if you're like, hold space, I have no idea. That basically means allowing another person or yourself to be where they are in their emotions and their whatever's going on in their chaos, etc., without having to like sewage it. And what I mean by that is like patting someone in the back, well-meaning, but not working, and saying everything is going to be okay. Or, like for dead people especially, right, is, well, they're happy on the other side. It's going to be okay. This was meant to happen. All that crap. Just holding space means you just allow them to be where they are. You might say things like, I hear you. How can I support you? I'm witnessing you, etc. You might do things, say things like that. But I would say I've been a healer most of my life and didn't really realize it. I have been actively on my healing journey since 2011. And I have been a coach since 2014. And realizing how many people that I've helped, how many people that I've inadvertently pissed off, which is part of the work that I do. It's crazy when you think about it, how this odd little intention of, I'm a really good listener and I'm very intuitive, and I would just give people, at first it was just giving people advice and, saying, well, I'm getting this notion that this would be a really good idea. Or I feel like, it's almost kind of like seeing a chess game top down and being able to look at it and be like, this is going to be the next piece. This is going to be the next move. This is what you should do. This is what the energy is telling me.
Interesting. And being a medium too. I mean, how long have you known you were a medium? And I could have been the same way.
consciously known I've been a medium since about 2016, 17-ish. But I can look at certain things in my life and know I've been a medium probably my entire life. I just didn't really understand what the hell I was doing. And so I didn't really, I grew up Catholic, right? So a lot of the things that I do now, a lot of the spaces that I'm in, most religious, so it's not just Catholicism, most religious aspects will say, that I've had people say I'm playing with demons. I've had people say I'm trying to summon people. I've had people say all kinds of crazy things. And I'm like, no, that's not even where I'm not even like, I won't even allow, like I've had people a few weeks ago say, do you want to play with a Ouija board? No. Play with and Ouija board do not go in the same sentence, kids. They just don't. No. So, I have stories and like recognitions going back to my childhood.
Really? Okay. What kind of stories do you have? Feel free to share.
So, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and my dad and my stepmom at the time were renting a very old, like 200 plus year old farmhouse in the middle of Maine. And my bedroom was the top of these creaky old stairs, and it looked out onto the backyard and onto a hayfield that we did not own. And I looked out the window one night and I saw this little girl in a white, like glowing little girl in a white dress. And to my knowledge, there was nobody around us. Like the closest person was a mile and a half to the right of us. I didn't really understand distance at that time, but there was no children. It was not a neighborhood. It was just a bunch of houses randomly on a country road. Right. And I just remember thinking, oh, I want to meet that little girl, because I was a lonely little kid. And I probably, within the couple days of that happening, would in fact ask my dad if there was any families around with little kids, specifically a little girl. And my parents chalked it up to me having a really active imagination. And it was like, okay, guess that's not going to be a thing. And I would see her again later, again at night, looking out the window, and would find out years later that she was the only survivor of a fire. And when I say years later, I mean like this happened when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I found this information out probably like 5 or 6 years ago, going down a rabbit hole, just random rabbit hole, state of Maine history, something like that. Just like, oh my God, that house looks really familiar. And down the rabbit hole I went. Another thing that happened was I was at my grandparents' house. And again, my grandparents they're both deceased, but the house is still in the family. At the time, it was probably about a 150-year-old house that was owned by a prominent doctor in town. And I was coming down the stairs, and I was standing at the top of the stairs and at the landing, and there was a gentleman in a 3-piece suit and a top hat, and I had no idea who he was. I'd never seen him before in my life. And I'm just kind of standing there looking at him like, as a child, like, what do you do, Right. And then my mom summoned me, and I went downstairs, and he disappeared, and I went downstairs. Those were things that I cited as apparitions and whatnot. When the first time I communicated with somebody was, I want to say, either it was 2016 or 2017, and it was completely by accident. And I'd had a couple things like that. I'd had something happen in New Orleans. I was at a plantation and thought someone bumped into me, and there was a huge tour group. And so I turned around to say, I'm sorry, excuse me, let me move. And there was no one there. Wow. I've, had lots of those things happen where it's like, oh, okay. But I've had the fortunate honor to cross people over, and there was a woman that came into the crystal shop that I go to in Raleigh, and they were looking for random things. And she was like, I'm looking to tent my house. So long story short, I introduced myself, said who I was and what I do. And I said, you have something attached to you. May I remove it from you energetically? And I explained to her what I was going to do. And she was in a space where her brother, who just had passed away, owned a house north of Raleigh that was a Civil War hospital, which is not unusual in North Carolina and Virginia. That's very common that during the various skirmishes and battles and whatever, that they would just move into whatever house was nearest and use it as a Civil War hospital and, figure that out.
Yeah.
But I cleared somewhere in the name of, I cleared and crossed somewhere in the name of 250 soldiers. And
that were attached to her?
That were attached to her energetically, yeah.
Wow.
And she had tears running down her face, and the people that were also there, that she was facing her back to the store, or her back to the shop, and her face toward me. And that's it, and so I, cleared her, and I explained to her what was going on and whatever. And I said, you're in an old house, and I said, you're probably an empath where you take on other people's energy, emotions, etc. And she all of a sudden had this light bulb go off. And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, so your energy is open. And for most of us, our energy is open because we don't know to close our energy. Like people, when I tell people cleanse, ground, and protect themselves, they look at me a lot of times and I can tell immediately if you know what I'm talking about, and you're like, yeah, mental note to self to do that. Or if you're looking at me like, what? Like they have no idea. So it's explained to people how that works, what we're doing. And, so I said to her, I said, you're an empath and you took on these people's energy. And again, it's not like it's a bad thing or whatever. It's just, they are trying to find, their energy is just trying to, it's like not, and I tell people, if you want a visual, you're in a dark room, you have no idea where you are, and you're trying to get out, and you're pawing against the wall to try to find a light switch or a door, either one, to get out.
Trying to find a door to get out of there, yeah.
Yes. And so when entities, spirits attach to us, and I consider entities like any energy that's attached to us, and waywards are the icky ones, the ones that don't need to be there. It's a simple, most of the time, is just saying goodbye, go. They don't want to be here. They want to go to where they're supposed to be. And so a lot of times people get in the space of and I'm like, well, people get into the space of, oh my God, someone wants to hurt me. I'm like, well, if you keep taking it back, because I've seen that happen too, where people if they're taking on the energy, the sickness, for example, and they're chronically ill and they're getting attention out of it, they're not going to want it cleared. They're not going to, and the thing is we get into a space oftentimes of, if it's getting you something, whether it's attention, money, whatever, a lot of times people don't want to heal from their sickness.
Right.
And so, doing that work. So I ended up clearing this woman and, did everything needed to do, sent them on their merry way, and got her the selenite that she was looking for, and, explained what I was doing when she came, when she was came in here trying to waste time and whatever. And she's like, you just totally changed my life. And,
wow.
I just gave her a hug, and she got her selenite, and I explained exactly what she needed to do. And then when she left, the owner of the shop said, okay, explain to me what you just did. Because I could see it. It was very real. I just want to know what you did. So I explained what I did. And he's like, oh, okay. And there was several other people around that were kind of witnessing this and in awe. And I said, when I talk about this, I never want you to just believe me. It's, because seeing is believing. I'm like, well, yeah, but if it's important to remember that with these topics, sometimes you're challenging some of the very beliefs, someone's foundational beliefs.
Right.
So I'm not a pushy person about it, but I like to share the experiences. I like to enlighten people. And frankly, when you get someone to a space where you clear their house, you clear their person, you get them in a different space, they stop having, weird crap happen to them 24/7. Those are very real things. And being able to help someone out with that is a big deal. And I joy in doing it.
Right. Now, the lady that you helped in that shop, was she experiencing any effects from having all these attachments or anything? Or
she told me she felt tired, and she told me that she felt like they had been trying to decide. She said weird things are definitely happening at the house. She said we were trying to decide if we were going to sell it or not, or if they were going to keep it in the family. And she's like, we're not from here. It was the first thing she said to me. She's like, we're not from here. But we're also trying to decide if we're going to sell the house because, my brother really loved the house and so on and so forth. She had told me that, and I said, is it fact? Because a lot of times, having an entity attached to you isn't going to be necessarily something that you're physically going to feel.
Right.
If you're really energy sensitive, if you're an HSP, you might, but a lot of times, in my experience, in the experience of people that I've talked to that, we've commiserated about it, you will have people that will have, sometimes like fatigue, or sometimes like something happens and you feel like it's not yours. Those sorts of things, like, okay, this doesn't, and I tell people all the time, like, that's why you clear ground and protect your energy. And even a simple phraseology to do that is I'm clear, I am clear, I am clear. And I have it on my phone to do it several times a day so that I have more powerful tools than that at this point. However, as a basic starting point to clearing your energy, especially if you're around a lot of people, especially if you're an empath. Another fun one, if you're in an office or teaching kids, is washing your hands. And just washing your hands of the day thus far, because water is a grounder and it's also obviously with soap, a cleanser. And so to do a 2-in-1, okay. So, to try, I think, to anything that we can do to help ourselves nowadays, I'd like to impart on people.
It's funny, going back to the first story that you told about the girl outside your window. It's funny that you mentioned that because a few months ago, I interviewed somebody who had that same experience. That I forgot where she was, someplace in Missouri, I believe. When she was a little girl, she would look out the window and see this little girl playing in her front yard, and she was the only one that saw that. Her mom and dad didn't see it, and I don't think they believed her until much later when they found out that something had happened. So I've been finding out, this year doing this show, that a lot of things that have happened in one show, you inadvertently kind of repeated it with the same experience. So a lot of this stuff is kind of interacting on different episodes. It's kind of interesting.
Yes. And I think too, the thing is adults have biases. And a lot of adults, we have built up crap. And if you're in a space where, like, as a kid, every adult was once a child, and that may seem like a well, duh, but at the same time, if you are an adult in your like 70s or 80s and you grew up, around parents who, were working 3 jobs, or were in a world war, or were in some other kind of conflict or whatever, you didn't have time for your kids and their whimsical stuff.
Right.
And so a lot of kids did get pushed aside. A lot of kids did get their thoughts and their ideas, and you've got a really active imagination. Cannot tell you how many clients I've worked with who we stumble upon these things, and they're like, "Oh my God, I have clairs." I'm like, everybody has clairs. It's intuition. We are inborn with intuition. But if you're in a space where somebody, calls you names or makes you feel small or belittles it in some way, then you're going to be far less likely to own it, never mind celebrate it. And,
Right.
I think that, little kids especially, when if they're lonely or if they're in a space of, when spirits show themselves, in my experience, a lot of times they're showing themselves, one, to literally be seen, but also to, show the person who they're showing themselves to. A lot of times it's, to comfort the person they're showing themselves to. But it also, a lot of times in my experience, is to, hey, I see you type of thing. Like the universe letting you know that it sees you. And, and again, it's far more common that kids see things like that than adults. Because again, kids don't have the biases. We're imaginative until we get older.
Right. Right. And, that kind of leads me to think that, kids always talk about having imaginary friends and everything. Is it really imaginary, or is it, something somebody that they actually see?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely, there's something to that. And it's funny because there was somebody famous who posted about their child having, saying, I keep seeing this person. I keep seeing this person. And they posted, on IG and said, hey friends, some of you are going to be like, what the hell when I post this, but, I don't know if there's any of the parents out there that experience this, but, my little kid is like 2 and she keeps saying that she's seeing this and this and this. And I'm kind of honestly freaked out. And anybody that's got suggestions, feel free to post them. And the comments were like wild. You had some people that were like, your kid needs a therapist. There was people that were saying, my kid has that too. My kid has, her little favorite best friend. I figure as long as it's not hurting anybody, I ask her questions and so on. Yeah. There was one woman that had said, I'm a medium myself, so I expect that my kids will also have gifts, and I just roll with it. Right. And I think that's, the thing is just, and I had messaged this person and said, hey, I'm a medium and I, can work with little kids and would be more than happy to jump on a Zoom call with you or jump on a phone call with you and, find out what her experience is and see what I can do to support you. Right. And she never did reach out to me, but that's okay. But it was interesting. And I also commented on publicly and said, hey, your kid's an indigo. And there's nothing wrong with it. She's not, it's not going to, if you want me to, here's the thing you can do to protect your room, protect your house, etc. But again, I think that, on the one hand, kids do have crazy great imaginations because they don't have all the lockdown stuff yet of society about how you should and shouldn't do things. Right. On the other hand, there's also the kids are naturally empathic. Kids are naturally intuitive. We all are naturally intuitive. It's when we stomp it out because, we don't want to listen to that voice or it's telling us something that's really silly and we're judging the crap out of it, trying to make it go away, as opposed to being in a space of like, hey, probably not the brightest idea to do this or that. I mean, to give you a short thing, one of my friends a couple years ago, we were at a race and it was on a mountain. And, one of my friends was like, I'm going to go into town and, so on and so forth. And she was in the hallway and she slipped and fell in the Airbnb. And she's like, I think I'm just going to get a heating pad and just stay home, stay here, whatever. And, someone, when they were driving home that was also in our Airbnb, said, hey, we missed you, blah, blah, blah. And did you see the rock slide coming up the mountain? And of course we were all at the house, so we didn't see anything. And it's like, just be careful going down the mountain because there's debris in the road where the rock slide happened and there's one big rock and they're there now fixing it, whatever. And she said, the girl that had fallen, we all of a sudden were all saying, well, what time, was she, and she's texting. And so she timestamped it. And the guy was like, yeah, that's about when probably it happened. And I said, oh yeah, by the way, that's your intuition.
Wow. Yeah.
And because a lot of people don't understand, like they think that your intuition has to look or feel or be a certain way. And I've got dozens of examples of my intuition kicking into high gear about things and doing things and being in spaces where I would not have otherwise have been. But for my intuition, I would not have been there.
Right. That's awesome. You getting back to the little kids we were talking about before. My son, I guess he was about 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there, and him and my wife were talking about her dad, who had passed away, shortly before we got married and everything. So I don't know what they were talking about, something about people smoking or whatever, and or seeing somebody in the house. And he said, yeah, there's somebody right over there with a puffer cigarette. And he described it, and the way he described it was my father-in-law. And, it was really, it freaked her out. But, I do believe that he came in and visited his grandson in that room or whatever. So
that happens far more frequently than you know. Yeah. And it does freak people out because I had one about, it's probably been a year now. Someone PM'd me footage from their baby cam and said, hey, what is this? And am I like losing my mind, or is this something? And so she's like, she told me where it was. And I was getting chills watching it. And I said, oh, okay, yeah, you've got someone visiting.
Really? And, what happened in the video?
So you see the shadow of a person. It's a short person. It was like a grandma. It was a grandma or a great grandma, and leaning in the crib, and you see the hand like pat the baby's back. And this is a baby that's maybe 4 months old. Wow. And she said, am I losing my mind, or is there like something there? And I said, no, there's definitely something there. I said, so who didn't get a chance to meet her, but you knew that you were pregnant before they passed away? So she tells me, and I said, okay. So yeah, they're just checking in.
Oh yeah.
No harm. They don't mean no harm.
Yeah. They're just checking in, make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah. And that's very common for little kids or little babies to experience that. And nowadays that we have electronics, we have all the monitoring systems and whatnot and recording systems, and we catch a lot more of it. But it's been happening for, ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about you being a medium. How do you connect with spirits? Do they just come to you, or do you have to summon them, or what? How does that work?
Generally speaking, they just come to me. Like I'll just be having a conversation with somebody, or I'll be minding my own business a lot of times, and they will show up. Had someone the other day, I was talking to one of my clients, and I got the notion to say her name a certain way, and I said her name a certain way, and she went, oh my God, how did you know? My dad did that, and her dad had passed away. Her dad's been passed away for, I think, 3 years now. And so that's generally how they show up. I don't necessarily summon them. It's just a lot of times it's like people want to say hi. And I can ask for someone to step forward, but it's pretty rare that I do that. More often than not, they will, show up to say hi, show up to let you know that they've crossed over, that they're good. There was someone a couple weeks ago, I was taping a podcast, and somebody random showed up for someone and said, I'm good. And I said originally, not thinking about it, just said, obviously just speaking, said, I'm good. And the person said, oh my God. And said, my so-and-so used to say that. Wow. And they started laughing, and then they started crying and said, oh my God, what made you say that? I said, I have no idea. I said, it just, came out of my mouth. And they were needless to say, we ended up having later on in the podcast, we ended up having a conversation with that person. And they said,
Really?
we just have been wanting to know forever, that they're okay. And, that's one of the things I would encourage people into knowing is that your loved one, unless something tragic or untimely or nefarious happened, they are well. They are at peace. They are in perfect condition on the other side. However you believe that. If you believe that's heaven, you believe it's purgatory, whatever belief system you got works. And the only time that they would not be well is if they're in a space where they're conflicted because something happened to them. For example, I was talking to someone and I said, do you know someone named so-and-so? And they looked at me like dead in the eye and said, yeah. And I would have had no way of knowing this. And I said, well, they want you, I said, are you open to receiving a message? And they said, sure. And I said, they want you to know that they didn't mean to die.
Oh, wow.
And the person looked at me and just had tears in their eyes. And I said, it was an accidental overdose. They just were trying to get high. They just were trying to escape. And there was fentanyl laced in with the drug that they took. And they were trying desperately to be clean and stay clean. And they just were trying to have some fun. And the person just was like just in hysterical tears. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, don't apologize. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
I said, but they want you to know that, they know who gave it to them. And so the person I was talking to in this life, in this space in this realm, thank you, said someone's name. And all of a sudden I just was like full body chills. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, that's the person. And they said, is it worth going after them? And that immediately was a no. And I said, nope. Yeah. I said, and then I heard the words federal charges, and I was like, no, there's a much bigger fish frying that you don't got to worry about this situation. It's going to be resolved here. I mean, I don't know any details, didn't go looking for it, etc.
Wow.
But it's usually something where, loved ones will step forward just to let people know that they're okay, or that they're doing the right thing, or that they approve of something, those sorts of things.
I was talking to another medium a few weeks ago, and I was telling her that my father's come to visit me, but I haven't really seen my mom. And she said, well, just ask her sometime to come and visit. So I did that one night. I'm laying in bed. I said, Mom, I haven't seen you. Hope everything's good, and just show me a sign. The next day, I work for a meat company here in St. Louis, and we're taking like holiday orders for Thanksgiving and stuff. So I get a call from an old friend of my mom's, which was really weird because I hadn't talked to her in a long time. And then something else happened. I can't remember what it was, but something else happened that was a huge coincidence that my mom knew this person, and they both contacted me that day. So I think I got my wish that, Mom was somehow saying, yeah, everything's fine. I'm good. But, she wasn't the type that would, come out and say much. So, I've often, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I've often wondered, talking to mediums like you, I mean, would you get anything from me, possibly that, somebody that has passed on is coming, trying to contact me through you?
That will happen sometimes. And it just depends. It depends upon a million factors. And, I always, it's like, let it be spontaneous. And, I think that when people realize that, we can hear them, that's usually when they kind of get into a space of not shutting up. And I'll use my grandparents as an example. My grandma, when she was still alive, was a chatty Cathy. She would talk to anybody. She'd welcome anybody in her home, all the things. My grandpa was like, he would talk occasionally, but you would normally find him watching a football game or just, relaxing or off doing something, whatever he wanted to do, whether it was a project or whatever. And, now that my grandparents are both no longer of this world, they tend to hang out together. But my grandma's the one that will come through when I'm like, hey, Gram, I need this, this, and this. Like, hey, can you show me that this is, can you show me this or tell me, let me know this. And, she'll show up. And, one of the things I want to encourage people into is, ask. And then because this happens a lot, drop any expectation you have of how it's going to show up, how the people are going to show up.
Right. Because
one of the things that happened to a friend of mine about, it's almost 2024. So probably this is around 2019-ish or so. And her mom had been passed away for like 10 years or so. And she had been saying, I really miss my mom a lot. We're going through a lot. We're having a baby. We're moving house. It would be really nice to just hear from her. And I wasn't publicly, I wasn't publicly like telling people that I was a medium at that point. I was letting things happen, but I wasn't, doing all the things yet.
Right.
And so she is at the grocery store in line and she hears a woman and she messages me and she says, oh my God, I swear to you on my life that my mother was in the line at the grocery store. And I said, tell me more. And she says, I'm minding my own business. And I hear this woman say a phrase, and I don't even remember what the phrase was anymore. But she said, my mother was the only person who said that phrase that I ever heard say that phrase. Wow. And I turn around and I look at this woman and the woman is looking at me like, are you okay? And so she said, I told the woman why I turned around and looked at her. And she said, well, consider it a sign from your mother. Have a good day. Glad I could help you.
Wow, that's cool.
And, and she said, but I'm like, oh my God, because that totally, and I said, well, again, when we allow ourselves to receive the messages, we will get messages. And another one happened like 2 years ago where a friend of mine was in a space and she messaged me and she's like, do you know where peacocks live? And I'm like, out of nowhere, this is my inbox. And I said, random. And I said, like, you mean climate wise? I don't know what you're at, like in reference to what? And she said, well, I was driving down this road to go drop off something and pick up something for a charity event. And I saw a peacock in the road. I said, alive, dead, what? And she goes, no, like strutting his stuff, like full peacock-esque. And I said, oh, that must have been gorgeous. And so she tells me this whole thing. And I went, oh, wow. I said, well, there's your sign. And again, letting people show up and be in the space of, I always tell people, be open-minded, ask for the sign and then walk away from it and be in this. Because a lot of times we'll watch the pot to make the water boil as opposed to being in the space of like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I mean, I've had people where I've had conversations and we're in the conversation and like 2 or 3 days later, like I'll get a random notion or a random thought. I've had people randomly, like I've been driving down the road and been like, tell so-and-so such and such. And I'm like, and I'll say out loud, you realize that I'm driving down the road and can't stop and write any of this down. And it's like, don't worry, you'll remember when you get there. And I'm like, okay then. And like 45 minutes later, I get where I'm going, or half an hour later or 20 minutes later, I get where I'm going. And I have a really terrible memory, by the way. And,
same.
But I also realize that it's not a function of memory. What I do is not a memory function. And so, I get where I'm going and it's like, I know I got a message from somebody so-and-so. And I'm like, and I'll just go, a lot of times I'll just go start typing on my memo on my phone and be like, there's a message. I don't remember what it was, but I'm trying to remember it. And I'll just, at some point during the day later on, it's like, okay, grab your phone real quick and write all this down.
Yeah. No kidding. You had mentioned that you have a podcast.
I do have a
where
podcast.
can people where can people hear you and find you?
They can go on YouTube, Jillie Maria,
Mm-hmm.
JILLIEMARIA. The podcast is I Love Your Weird with Jillie Maria. There's one episode so far. I am looking to expand it. My idea is to normalize mental health and normalize what people think is weird, because I know that we are in a mental health crisis in this country, and especially among men. And we don't talk. We just let our feelings and our emotions and our stuff and our tragedies and our whatnot bottle up until we explode. And then we go, that person has that person has an anger management issue. No, they have a failure to feel their emotions issue. So the podcast was started with the notion that I wanted to bring guests on to talk about what they think is weird. And I've got some really cool guests lined up to come on and talk about everything from, I think I have a knitter coming up. I have somebody who's a marathoner. I have a couple people who think that, it's just, a couple people think that things that I think are pretty ordinary are weird. But again, that's the point, is to be in a space of, it's almost 2024.
Right.
Humanity's been around for over 2,000 years, and to be in a space where our mind is telling us that, like, we're the only person on earth experiencing, feeling, thinking, doing X is probably not true. But when we're having a dark night of the soul, or when we're having a rough day, our mind can win. And so the idea is to bring, people on and have those discussions. And also one of the pieces I'm expanding is free coaching around it. So I will also be doing free episodes that are dedicated to like half an hour, 45 minutes to coaching. And the only two conditions are that you share the podcast and that you know that it's going to be published. It's going to be live, as opposed to being a private client session. Because I really believe that, anything that we can do to destigmatize mental health is important, and to destigmatize emotional health is important. And like discussions like these about mediumship and intuition and, being a healer and taking the ego out of it, and just being like, I'm an ordinary person. And, my mom is still very Catholic. My mom still goes to church like 6 days a week. And, she also has seen me do my work, and she knows and believes in what I do and loves me anyway. And, it's important, I think, I know it's important to see and hear people.
Oh, yeah.
And to allow people to be seen and heard. Because I think a lot of times we feel like we get so in our head about being ostracized that our weird is just like no one else has our thing. And I'm like, listen, I think that, it's important to have that conversation. And,
there we go.
Hi there.
Hello. See, it happened.
Boom.
Yeah.
How tall was your mom?
5'2", if that.
Okay. I'm asking because as a really tiny woman, I'm trying to figure out if it's my grandma or yours.
Okay.
I just keep hearing someone saying, I love you, don't you? I don't see a face. I don't see any distinguishing. They're not giving me any, because normally they'll give me some kind of distinguishing thing, or they'll give me a nickname or something to verify. But it's interesting to have someone like over my shoulder saying, I love you, don't you? And it's like, she's short.
That sounds like her. I mean, she was in a wheelchair for a long time. So, but it does sound like her.
She's just saying, I love you. She's also, how many kids do you have?
I just have one.
Who is this? Who is this person? Because she's showing me like this. someone call you Polly growing up?
My dad wanted to name me Paul because, according to him, there was no nickname for Paul, and he was the first one to call me Paulie.
Okay.
So Mom would call me Paulie every now and then.
Yeah, because I hear someone saying that you're doing good things, and definitely hearing them saying, "Good job, Polly."
She never said "good job, Paulie," but I mean that could be Dad. I mean, he hadn't called me Paulie in a long time, but I mean that could certainly be. You know what? It could be my grandma because she would call me Paulie.
Okay, yep, it's Grandma. Because she, like, all of a sudden I'm seeing a vigorous head nod. Like, okay, I'm going to figure out who this person is.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hi, Grandma.
Yeah, I'm seeing a vigorous head nod. I'm hearing we're fine. We're all fine. And she's showing me like a big table, like a holiday table.
Yep. Whenever we went over to their house, I mean, she had a pretty big table, and it was my mom and dad, me, her, my grandma and grandpa, my uncle. Yeah.
So who was always running around like cooking and serving and making sure everybody was okay?
She was Grandma.
Okay, that's Grandma.
Wow. That's weird. I haven't seen or heard from Grandma in a long time. And she died in 89. Both my grandmas died in 89. So yeah.
Did someone pass away in 92?
That
or was there some family event in 1992?
My grandpa died, let's see. I could have.
So I'm hearing it wasn't a death. Something happened. It feels like it was either a birth or a graduation or a job promotion or something.
I was at a community college until 92, I guess. And then I went to Webster University after that.
Yeah, I'm just hearing congratulations, good job.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, right? Like, oh my God. Yeah. Like,
I can't remember what I did yesterday. No, come on.
No, I hear you. It's just, I just, when they start bringing little tiny pieces and I'm like, okay, I just want to verify because it feels like they're all kind of together. So they're all kind of speaking with like the same voice, if you will. Basically just like, oh, we're here. So we all might as well say hi and chat.
Of course. Yeah. That's awesome. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. You're
welcome.
Well, thank them for sharing, I guess.
Yes. No, it's always interesting to see if people will come through for people. And I never, I have people say, oh, can you do this? And I'm like, I don't conjure.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see like how people will show up for people.
Yeah. And it's funny that this happened when the connection was bad. Like she was almost taking the energy from that to show up.
And that's definitely happened before.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Jillie, I really appreciate you coming on here, and even more after what just happened. I really appreciated that.
Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
And that's all the time we have for this episode. My thanks to Jillie Maria for taking the time to chat with us today, and my grandma for coming through and chatting with us as well. So if you would like more information about Jillie, you can find her at her website, jilliemaria.com, and there's a way to contact her through her website. Also, if you guys have any paranormal stories that you would like to share, please email me at paranormalamongus72@gmail.com. That's paranormalamongus72@gmail.com, and I can either read the story in a future episode or have you on as a guest on a future episode. All right, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. And until we see each other again, everybody stay safe, and I will see you in the next episode of Paranormal Among Us.